Okay, our lesson continues now in the accounts receivable module. In the accounts receivable module, again, we have a maintain files module, which we're going to go through. And that's a lot more complex than what you saw in any of the other modules. There's many, many more options, so we're going to be covering all of them today. First, starting with the system options. This is, of course, where you would set up your period, your next posting, general, etc. Customer defaults. Customer defaults are important to set up because when you set up a new customer, there are certain fields that must be filled in. And instead of you having to hand type the entry each time, this will automatically populate those fields for you. Aging. If you want to set your aging up to be 30, 60, 90 or 0, 30, 60, 90, 120, you would set it here. You would control it here. If you want to age your invoices by invoice date or by due date, you would set that here. This is a place to put individual comments based on how old the invoice is when you do a statement of account. You might want to say in the net 30, I'm sorry, this must have slipped your mind, please remit. And get a little stronger at 60. Gee, we haven't received your payment yet, is there a problem? Or at 90, pay up or Guido's coming. At 120 days, you may want to put in there, this account is being turned over for collections. And the system will automatically print that on the statement. Under the sales order defaults, this is where you would set up universally whether or not you charge the customer handling fees, restocking fees, free freight, or whether or not your customers accept back orders. And this is universal. After setting it universally, you can then go in and edit each individual customer to set those customers up. For instance, maybe one of your you want to charge a handling fee to everybody based on the number of boxes shipped UPS. It'll automatically charge it, and it is not overridable. You cannot change it. But for instance, you may have some customers that just don't pay it. So you would go to those customers, those individual customers, and turn that feature off. Any questions? Okay. The next thing that you're going to look at is entering sales lead source. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. A sales lead source is where did this order come from? Not where the customer came from, but also where the customer came from. It is where did we get this from? So that we can analyze our sales dollars. Any questions? Commission maintenance we're going to get into a little later. Pay type entry. This has to be entered to identify whether it was Amex, Visa, MasterCard, cash, etc. Transaction code entry, we don't really use that. We only use that when you're a foreign, you use dual currencies. Comment code entry. I told you that in the sales order module, there's a field for you to put the comments in. If you have a standard comment that you want to use occasionally, like thank you for your order, or no, that's already part. I don't know, something that you use occasionally but don't want everybody to have. You would set up the comment code here. You would fill in the difference. Like let's say, for instance, let's go into here and say a new comment code. Let's call it BOs. I don't know. I'll just make something up. Please note the back-ordered items are charged to you and have been canceled. Please reorder those items. Something like that. When you do something like that, then when you're in the sales order itself, you can actually hit the magnifier and bring that right into the order. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Let's go back. Customer type, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, about classifying your customers. You may want to separate them by funeral directors. You might want to separate them by floral, by hospitals, pet hospitals, pet related. So that when you do it, when you get a new product out, you might want to do a mailing specifically for that group of customers. Any questions?
No.
Okay. Industry code is whether it's a mass market, you know, so on and so forth. That's pretty easy. Credit card entry we no longer use. Bank code entry we covered in the accounts payable. It's the same. Tax code entry. If you get into any kind of retail, you will have to set up a sales tax code, and if you end up on the web, for instance, and start selling to the public, you, I think in January or July of next year, the government is going to require you to collect sales tax for anywhere you ship if they don't have a resale certificate.
If it passes.
If it passes. Now,
It's not gonna pass.
one thing that you really have to be conscious of is in the state of Washington, you guys have sales tax here?
Right.
Mm-hmm. If you sell to anybody, you better have a resale certificate on file.
Yep.
Because when the tax board comes up your tush, pulling them out is really hard.
Mhm.
So make sure you have that. Do you have that already?
Yeah, I've got his book, but I gotta go back and update him.
Right. Okay, so in each customer record, there's a place for you to fill that in. Okay? Any questions? Okay? Division, is whether you do separate divisions for your income and so forth. That identifies what general ledger accounts get hit. So when we go to this one here, it tells you what your sales accounts are and so forth.
Should be the same, shouldn't it?
Everything except the accounts receivable. Remember we switched it.
Sales or receivable?
I think it's sales.
Okay.
The sales account we switched.
Yeah. So we track sales.
Okay.
division.
Billing code entries. Billing codes are things that you set up for items that are not in the inventory, that will never be in the inventory. They're not commissionable, such as finance charges. Okay? If you go in here and you create a finance charge, and don't ever call it a finance charge, by the way, because you're not a lending institution, you don't have the right to charge finance charges. We're going to call it a service charge, SC. Okay? Service charge. Is it taxable? No, because we don't do tax. Is it commissionable? No. What's the rate? We're not going to put it in there. Okay? And that's a price. And what account is it going to go to? In this case, it's going to be income. Well, let's do finance charge. Finance charge income.
You can't do that.
You can on your
We're not a financial institution.
you can on your balance sheet. You just can't send it to collections as a finance charge.
I know.
Okay, so there you have it. And so when you do, and when you run the actual utility, which we'll get to in a minute for issuing finance charges, it'll actually ask you what's the category, and it'll create an invoice for that.
Okay.
Okay. Terms code entry, we've covered that in the payables, so we're not going to go through that again. Sales order entry, salesperson entry. When you have a sales rep, we'll bring up Jeff here. If you have any sales reps, this is the main group. So you would fill in the percentage that you pay the rep. JD is not the code, you don't put that in there. You put the percentage in right here. So
Zero.
it's 0 in this case. If he had reps underneath him, then you would go over here to the rep tab and add his road reps.
Okay.
Okay? Any questions? No? Okay. Now, within the next few months, we're completely rewriting our commission system. Completely rewriting it. It is going to be extremely robust. We've been working on it for about 6 months. And it's cool. It's really cool.
Okay.
Okay?
So we don't need to learn it.
Well, you do, because you're still in, you know, it's not gonna be delivered for another couple months. And hopefully you'll have sales by then.
That will have reps, signs, and moving and walking by now.
Okay, so, the last thing is customer entry. I'm gonna just bring up a customer. Oh, we don't have a customer. Let's go pull this one here. This customer here, for instance, when you start entering a customer, there are 7 tabs that you need to go through. The first tab shows you the information about them. Now, if you were on the internet, I could hit map and it'll actually MapQuest it for me.
Wow.
You know.
Isn't that neat?
Oh, why he added that stupidest thing I ever saw in my life. Except
Going to visit customers.
Goes back for collections.
well, what it is that it was actually designed for a route company, a company that had routes, and when they went to go set up their customers, they would MapQuest to that route
Well, you
location.
make a change on the program for one, everybody gets it.
That's right, everybody gets
That's
it.
the motto.
That's how it works, and we don't charge extra for it.
Yeah,
So, unlike your
that's
experience.
awesome.
Okay, customer contact, if there's a contact, fill it in. If it's a resale customer, fill in the resale certificate. You should make a habit of filling it in, whether it's in Washington or not. Okay? Defaults, who is the rep, what terms are they, what division are they? If it's a JD Imports, make sure you identify it as a JD Imports one. Who's the sub rep? What's their tax codes? This is where the credit cards are stored. If you have an in-house rep that is assigned as you guys grow, and you start saying, okay, you're responsible for the Northeast, you're responsible for the Southeast, this is where you would assign them. Okay? This is where you would assign credit limits. Okay? Finance charge. Statement cycle. If you had a really large database, you could separate your customers by a statement cycle so that you would only run cycle A, cycle B, cycle C. And that's all that would run in statements. Okay? If you're going to put them on credit hold, click here. That puts them on instant credit hold. I'm sorry? Notes. You can have as many contacts per customer as you want just by listing it here. I filled in buyer for everybody so that it would establish somebody. This is where you would put for your eyes only notes. This is notes about the customer in general. Okay? Pricing. If you were setting up a special pricing of products for this particular customer, you would fill it in on this tab, or during order entry, let it build as it's going. And it'll automatically build it and fill this in for you. Any questions?
Yeah.
If you were doing EDI, you'd fill in this tab, except if you had a customer that negotiated really, really good rates with you, for instance, and you weren't going to pay full commission for that customer. Let's say, for instance, you got Target. Target usually beats you up pretty bad in pricing, so you don't want to give the rep 15% for Target orders, but everything else he writes, he can get 15%. But for Target, we want 5%. We would fill in 5% on this tab, and the system would automatically override it during order entry. Okay. System options. Remember I told you about how you can overwrite those mass fields when we went into the system manager about freight, etc. This is where you would override it for each individual customer. If the customer required that you wrote specific information on each document, for instance, had to have the vendor number, or double check order, or whatever, you would write it here on this tab and then check mark this little box here. And every time you enter an order for this customer, that information would be pulled in to the order. It's called a shipping marker or a sidebar.
Which tab is it?
That's in tab 7. Okay? Any questions? about entering a customer. Okay?
Well, I have a question actually.
Yes.
How's it different from entering a customer in the order entry?
It's the same.
model?
They're the same.
Okay.
Okay? So that concludes our maintain files under the sale accounts receivable module. I'm going to stop the recording.